leaders. I have anchored a lot of our work, of BCG's work with FICCI in the past, and extremely privileged to introduce our August panel. Can I just request everybody to give maybe a minute's introduction? I'll call out your name. You could just give a quick introduction, and then we can move on to the questions. I'll also then set up how we could run the discussion going forward. Can I request Abhishek, if you could?
Yeah. Hi everyone. I'm Abhishek Man Gupta. I'm the founding chairman for FICCI Young Leaders Forum in Madhya Pradesh. On the work front, I lead a private university, Jagran Lake City University, as the pro-chancellor of the university. Also, we run schools, 7 of them under the society, Jagran Social Welfare Society, where I head the strategy and I'm also joint secretary. So our core competency has been in the field of education. We are spread across the state of Madhya Pradesh, and we are now teaching students from pre-nursery to PhD level. So roughly under our various initiatives, we are teaching around 15,000 students currently. And I'm very happy to be part of this panel. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Abhishek, for taking your time out and to share a lot of your knowledge and experience. Can I welcome Rituraj Sinha? Rituraj, if you could please give a quick introduction about yourself.
Hi, my name is Rituraj Sinha, and it's good to be here. I head SIS Group as the Group Managing Director, and SIS is a listed security and business services major in this country. I am also associated with FICCI for the last 7 years, and I chair the FICCI sectoral committee for private security and business services.
Thank you, and big welcome. Could I request Viren to give a quick introduction, and then we can move on.
Hi everyone, my name is Viren Shetty. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Narayana Hrudayalaya, a hospital group based in Bangalore. And we have hospitals across India, Bangladesh, and the Caribbean. My role as Chief Operating Officer is to drive a lot of the operations transformation and digital transformation in the group. And I do work with a lot of organizations, including FICCI, on the healthcare services aspect.
Viren, thank you very much for taking time out from your busy schedule. We'll really look forward to your opinions today. And last, let me. I'm absolute privilege to welcome Shashwat. Shashwat, if you just give a quick minute introduction, and then we can kick things.
Sure. Hi everyone. My name is Sasha Sumani. I am the VP of Strategy at HSI Limited. Many of you will know us as Hindware. We are into 4 business verticals now, primarily sanitary ware and faucets. We also make pipes. We also recently entered consumer products, and then we have a glass packaging division as well. I'm very heavily involved in the sanitary ware business. I've been here involved for the last year or so. And I think I might be the youngest person on the panel today. So it's a pleasure to be here, and I really look forward to the discussions today.
Well, I'm told that age and prowess of thought actually have very limited correlation. So we extremely happy to have you on board. Look, I mean, I've spent almost more than 2 decades of my life working, a decade working as into category creation in the food space with ITC. So when ITC diversified beyond its core businesses, I was a second member on that team to expand that business, and then work quite extensively with multinationals as well as promoter-run companies in India to drive next wave of growth and performance. It's always, I think, I don't want to sound old, but I think it's always just absolutely just a great learning experience to be with panelists like you and hear how the new wave and the next generation of business is actually shaping what India's future of commerce is going to be tomorrow. So thank you once again for all. Let me actually kickstart, and I think to me, unfortunately, it's a bit of a discussion amongst us. I would have loved to welcome some audience questions. So it's not easy to get that on this format. But what we'll try and do is keep it as discussional. Please do feel free to step in wherever you think you have a point of view beyond just the question that I might be addressing someone with. I will leave the last 3 or 4 minutes for some closing comments. But and I think candidly, to me, I've always experienced that while each one of you will have your own strengths in your areas of business, I think what the audience will value the most in this conversation is just your personal experiences and your choices that you've made in both personal as well as in your professional life, and what has been the guiding light behind that. I think that discovery is always going to be something which will be unique, and I'm sure everybody will really value from that. So let me start off, and I think I'll put this question to everyone. What's been as you come out through great educational experiences, studying in India, studying internationally, a lot of options to learn business on Wall Street in New York, or to do investment banking, or to do something else. But what's prompted you to come back to the family business and try and create something of your own legacy? What's really been the choice and the choice driver for you personally? So Abhishek, if I could start with you, and then maybe we could go on the same sequence of then hearing Rituraj, Viren, and then Shashwat on what's been the driver to join the family business, and how do you see it personally rather than trying to doing something outside as your first employment option?
So for me, it's been like a combination. So when I was studying, we were primarily into school education. And then my father and I had a lot of discussion and said that why shouldn't we go and expand into higher education? That's a natural progression. But because we never went in there, so my father said, why don't you come back and set up the higher education space? So I think it was kind of a bait for me to come back and not stay. I mean, I had a job with Emirates in Australia as a regional assistant brand manager. So I was working, and I had just stepped into like for a couple of months there. And then me and my father thought that why not let's get into higher education, and that's how, I mean, for me it was more like a startup coming back and starting everything from scratch to get into the higher education. I mean, I think I went through all the stages of a startup except the most difficult one, I think, which is the raising of funds. But I think it's been really satisfying. And though I was more from a marketing and a brand management point of view, my whole of education is from that area. So I always had a dream of setting up a advertising agency and do a brand consultancy and on those areas. But when I came into higher ed, I realized that I think the biggest aspect apart from learning is the brand development into the education sector, because that's where the pull starts coming in. And then I could use all of these of my traits which I learned over the years into the school as well as in higher education. And today, I mean, I look back of my 12 years into working now, and I feel really satisfied that we have established some of the really like great things into higher ed spaces. But also I have been able to fulfill my passion about the brand consultancy, and I've developed quite a few businesses around our education as an extension for this. So I think, I mean, for me, it was really a no-brainer to, I always wanted to come back also. I mean, it was not that I wanted to be there, but I wanted to work for a couple of years and then come back to have an experience of the other side. So I think for me, the higher education bait was the biggest thing which just pulled me back into the family business. And yeah, I am here now.
No, thank you for that, Rituraj. Your take on making a choice to to join the family business. Rituraj, you're on mute. Can you please unmute it?
Hi, thanks for that. I mean, honestly, I didn't want to join the family business. I mean, I went to Doon and I went, to Leeds business to pursue my further education. The idea was to get into investment banking. Didn't quite get the break I wanted, and then 9/11, the September 11 attacks on the World Trade Center happened, and in a matter of 1 year, the prospects of security as a business globally changed. I mean, everybody from GE and Jack Welch to UTC were talking about taking big bets on security and things like that, and that's when I decided to try and see if I can come back and do something here, and came back and joined the business in 2002. So I think I didn't quite want to be in the family business, to be honest, but I think uh, destiny was kind that I came here, and it's been a good journey for the last 18 years.
Well, it's always good to anchor on destiny. Viren, your thoughts?
Yeah. When you say that, how did you choose to come back and join the family business? You're presupposing that there is a choice involved. A lot of Indian promoter.
I genuinely believe that that you are always the center of your universe, and all choices reside with you.
The Indian promoter families for generations have always treated the sons of the family. If you do something outside, theek hai beta, you can play house abroad, but you're coming back, no? When you're coming back. So this thing of choice is hilarious too. No, but to be honest, the truth also is that there are natural advantages towards doing that. If you're in your early 20s, no other company in their right mind is going to give you that much responsibility and that much freedom to fail, that much freedom to experiment and do different things. And of course, you are essentially unfireable in the job that you're in. So that gives you that sense of long-term security, which is not really true if you are working in McKinsey or JP Morgan or so on. So it does give you a kind of mental clarity to pursue things on a much longer time horizon. And that's why, there's a lot of data that comes out about how majority of businesses that tend to last beyond the cyclical nature of the market always tend to be those run by families. That I would say is the more, detailed explanation. But yeah, it's both. It's not one or the other.
Got it. No, that's quite insightful. And we in BCG run something which is called as the Family Business Institution, and I think something that you say is quite profound. If you look at multi-year value creation and return on equity, the shape of curve of reaching the same outcome for a family-run business versus professionally run business, you will find the shape of curve to be very, very different, where the ability to absorb the runway of gestation for much bigger gains into the future, I think is that patience is there with in the family group. I mean, that's fairly well, very, very, very well said. Shashwat, your thoughts as we move forward?
Yeah, sure. So just a quick background. So I'm born and raised in Delhi. I went for my foreign education. I did my BA in economics and psychology at UCLA. And I always knew I wanted to come back. I just thought that, Hindware being a company primarily at that point, which was into sanitaryware, as a young, 18-year-old, I was like, I don't want to really, enter sanitaryware and make pots for a living. I always wanted to come back, but I always had a vision to sort of do something new, exciting. So I came back. I worked with Deloitte Consulting for India for 2 years because I really think it's very important to sort of get structure before you enter the family business, especially in terms of your soft skills. I think navigating the family business is again very different for most people, but it's important to get that personal structure in before. So I worked there for 2 years, and then I decided to enter the family business. I know the minute, so entering the family business for me, I always kind of knew I wanted to do it. But the the real time where I actually knew for a fact that I want to do this was my father invited me to sit in on a meeting. And this was the first time I'm sitting in the meeting, and I just sat there and observed, and it was the most fantastic experience that I could have imagined. Luckily the board members were there, and I realized that it doesn't matter what the product is or what you're manufacturing. It really is the challenges that happen in the back end, and that is something that I wanted to work on. That's something that I felt that I can contribute to. Other than that, growing up in a family business, it was part of dinner table conversations, right? Just talking about the challenges, expansion plans. It was just every day. I think we've been very lucky where me, my father, my grandfather sit down for dinner every single day together. So it's just been a part of my life for as long as I could remember. So yeah.
That's really cool to hear. And Shasha, just to continue on the chain of thought, as you moved from Deloitte, you moved into the family business. I mean, how would you articulate, the top challenges? I know, life is full of challenges on an everyday basis as you run things, and while you're in the strategy function, but multiple verticals, complications of people, complications of running business India, complications of regulations. As you wade through all of that, what have been the two most profound or deep professional challenges that you have experienced or seen?
Okay. Well, I think this I can say is for everyone here. I think the pandemic has obviously been the biggest challenge this year. And everything the pandemic brought along with it, right? You literally had to start from scratch. We did we tried to right size the organization. I think we also did a zero-based costing, renegotiated all of our contracts. That was a huge challenge. But other than that, I think what has been something that has been a challenge for me personally is to sort of understand each business and how to understand how we can get all the businesses talk to each other, taking the best practices from one business and addressing it to a completely different sector, right? So, for example, a consumer business, what we learned from there, applying that to a B2B business, which is a glass packaging business, and vice versa. That has been something for me that takes time to understand. You have to be extremely patient, and you have to be extremely, extremely precise and detail oriented to see how you can just get the businesses to talk to each other. I think that has also been a huge, huge challenge. But the only thing that helps there is just time and detail.
Well, Shashwat, I had heard that COVID-19 has made people stay at home longer. I mean, I'm sure that's been good for business for you, right?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, yes. In some ways, no. I hope. I'm sure they're using our products more.
All right. Viren, any thoughts on that one? On your top two challenges. Healthcare as a space again comes with a combination of being a very, at the end of the day, a social business, but it also comes with its challenges of regulation, of capital intensity, and so on. So, what have been the top two real hillocks that you have sort of waded through?
The ability to hold two opposing viewpoints in your head. Either it makes you this really accomplished trapeze artist, or it makes you mad eventually. If we have to simultaneously serve the needs of society, this service at extremely low cost, satisfy a government that always feels that the healthcare businesses charge too much, whereas in parallel, provide the best services, pay for the best doctors, get the best drugs, put in the best medical equipment, put in all the standards and processes, and somehow make enough money to pay the bank. Forget about making supernormal profits. If you're trying to say that as a challenge, I mean, that is a challenge as old as time. I mean, even from the beginning, if you're talking even from the time of Sushruta, I'm sure he would have worried about how much should I really charge for my services, or do you think my brand name will get me going and I'll get some Raja to sponsor what I'm doing and the rest services I'll offer for free. That is not, I would say, the challenge. That is the essence of healthcare. The challenge is in every single day when you're trying to do things a little differently. when you're faced against something that is so overwhelmingly a part of the status quo, and no one ever bothers to question, like Chesterton's fence. If things are done a certain way, clearly there's a good reason needs to be there. Who are you, young fellow who's just out of business school, to come here and tell us that this thing should be done any different? And it does require some amount of persuasion, influence, patience, no doubt. Of course, it definitely helps that I am who I am. I'm related to who I'm related to, so I'm able to drive through a lot more. But no doubt, it is one of the most significant challenges that anyone has to face in terms of trying to change the direction that a company seems to go on. One more challenge I would say is this is more by virtue of being decision makers in these organizations, especially ones that are related to the promoters in an executive role, is the, I wouldn't say inability, but I would say the difficulty in getting a good assessment of how way off the mark you are. Because if you're trying to propose something, there's very few people that can oppose you other than the people you're related to. Whereas the people on the execution side definitely have the sense of, call it what you want, a filial loyalty or a deference or just general sense of, anyway, it's his car to crash and burn. You never really get the kind of raw and honest feedback about whether such a thing is fully thought through. And so, well, at least I find in myself, and I wouldn't say that's a universal experience, always second guessing the things that we want to initiate and try to probably agonize over every single major step function that you take, rather than just going by your gut and say, yeah, it's going to work.
It's very, 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 very good and very profound answers. Thank you for this. Thank you for that. Let me actually, just take a cue from Viren what you just mentioned. And I think I'm sure each one of you would have faced this challenge of how do you question the status quo, question a traditional practice of doing business, and try and make a change, very often incremental and sometimes transformational. What has been your learning experience? And Rituraj, I'll bring you here. What has been your experience in terms of driving some of these changes, this questioning of traditional business practices, and pushing an experienced, though aged organization, to do something differently?
Well, I think oftentimes, change is triggered by external environment, market conditions. But in family businesses, I think it's also sort of triggered by generational shifts. Everyone has his own approach. And, honestly, I'm sure it differs business to business, but for something which is as operationally intensive, like business services, the industry that I operate in, or even financial services, where you're dealing with, hundreds of thousands of customers, hundreds of thousands of employees, branches spread over a wide network. I'm sure even healthcare, for that matter, is very operationally intensive and far more risky than other services that are delivered. But my learnings on this, Rachit, have been that ultimately technology and HR are the two fundamental levers of change, irrespective of industry. And one has tried to adopt technology both at the back end and at the customer facing side to change the customer experience and to change the operational efficiencies at the back end, get more leverage. And I think building those IT systems is completely fundamental to scalability. An enterprise can only scale to the extent of its technology backbone, and I don't think the experience would be very different. I mean, at least I took a lot of inspiration from the banking sector and how they completely revamped between 2000 and 2010 in terms of the way they operate and the way they deliver experience to customers. The second lever, Rachit, in my mind has always been HR, or what we term now as people and culture. I think in a business like ours, where there's no plant, there's no machinery, there is no your people are your asset base, and your culture is the USP. Two service businesses in the same industry, same scale, deliver different levels of quality to end user, primarily because of the culture and the people who are embedded in the business. So I think on that side, everything from talent acquisition to, talent development, retention, reward and recognition. I think that whole program has so much scope of refinement and re-refinement and improvement, which is constant. Uh, so I think from my perspective, in my last 18 odd years in SIS, I think what we've tried to do is to leverage of technology and people and culture to build a scalable business model, and that's how we built a company which was roughly 25 odd crores in 2002, and now it is clocking close to 9,000 crores. So that scalability is basically an outcome of tech and HR.
Fabulous answers. I mean, it's actually, and this is, if you were to step into any organization, you'll actually find that the people who actually question their contribution the most to the larger organization is actually the IT and the HR departments. They just think that the core business lines, be it sales, be it core operations, what's running the show, and generally both of these departments feel very undervalued. And I think you make a very, very, very fair point in terms of just the larger role and the larger contribution. Great points. Abhishek, your thoughts on the same in terms of driving change? I think education is a space where, candidly, everybody comes with very strong views, and hence, I'm sure it becomes even harder, to drive some of the change management.
I think I agree with Rituraj on this. HR and tech are the two key areas. I think any generation to generation movement happens, that these are the two areas which pretty much changes, and these also are like, as a new generation, when comes into a business or a family business for that matter, they bring a lot of inputs from whatever they have learned new just after their grad schools. So when I joined my family business, and as we are in the education sector, it's a completely manpower driven, because as Ritra said, teachers are our assets. If they are not performing well, nothing really matters then. And for us, when I joined, I realized that we were, still a very traditional family run business kind of a situation, where we didn't have a lot of documentations and procedures in place. So when I joined in, I have always believed to hire the specialist, not as a teachers, obviously are specialists, but specialists in various roles. So my first area was to look into the HR aspects of the things, because I realized that if I give a growth path to my teachers, if I make them understand that this is your growth path, then I think their performances increase tremendously. So I think this was one of the very big areas. It took a lot of time. And today we have a manpower of around 5,500 people working across our various organizations. Another big area for us has been in the HR space was the grade 4 employees, because they are one of the massive amount of people who work within the school and education sectors. And getting them into a process was very difficult. So we invested heavily into training and development. We created our own HRD kind of a center, training center within the organization, and ensured that every teacher, every staff goes through a training in a regular interval of time, because the system change, the teaching methodology change, and the way you approach today. Today education has become very customer centric. Parents want everything on the tip. You can't be saying, like in our times of school, okay, you come after 5 days, we'll tell you. They want everything in. And with the new age parents, obviously tech became a very important part. And everyone understands in education, especially, how technology have evolved in the last 4 to 5 years with all these big ed tech companies coming in. The communication has become really fast in the education sector between the parents and the teach and school. And we can no longer have this gap of coming later. The parent need information now. And I think these were the two very, very big areas. Technology especially was more difficult for me because the teachers come from very, like, they're experienced and they come from very a time when technology was not so relevant into teaching methodology. They prefer books than from teaching of PPTs or getting the ICT systems into the classes. So training them was the major big roadblock, I would say, which I faced when I came. And I think that was something which I went deliberately inside and said, okay, this I will take as a mandate for our organization to really get everything tech savvy. And today, I mean, we operate more than 700 ICT based classes. We have our own studios where now our teachers are developing their own content into audiovisual formats. So things have become really great, but I still believe that these are the two big areas where things were difficult to change, and we managed to do well in these areas now.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Abhishek. I think nothing like the the promoter family rolling up the sleeves and getting deep onto an issue to solve. I mean, quite inspirational. Let me actually move on to another question, and this one comes purely from my experience working with many promoter families, especially not just the first generation, but the second, third, fourth generation promoter families. And the big question there has always been about how do you dilute control. And control is a combination of management and operating decisions, as well as capital structuring. Now, and I'm very, very sure that there are, even within an organization and within a promoter family, there are alternate views to it. But do share your personal thoughts on what is the right time when the decisions around professional management to come in, external capital to come in, be it from capital markets or be it from private equity or be it from strategics. How are some of those decisions thought through? And especially, given the very interesting nature of the four industries that are represented here, would love to hear some thoughts on how you think about it personally, not of course as a representation of your company. Sasha, do you want to take a crack at that first?
Yeah, sure. So just about us, so we're a public company, and for us, obviously we have investors as well. But in terms of the thought process, I think now more than ever, it is extremely important to start professionalizing your company. I think we've been relatively lucky that way, that we don't have a very complex family. It's just I'm an only child. My father doesn't have any siblings, so luckily we've not had any issues there. But what we realize is that there's only so much the family can bring to the table, right? There is a huge availability. There's a huge pool of resources, of professionals now available, especially in the last 10, 15 years odd. Extremely well educated, have years of experience that can bring something to the table that the family can't bring. So I really do believe that it is now a time where you should start realizing, anyone who's in a family business, that you don't have to be involved in the day-to-day decisions. You don't have to micromanage everything. It's about, as the leader, as the promoters, your role is to identify the professionals that can help you in this journey, that align with your vision for the company and can execute it over the long term. And that also is aligned with even professionals like consultants, etc. Wherever you don't have the technical expertise for something, you should always reach out. I think it's wrong when someone says that hum kar lenge, we'll be able to manage ourselves. No, you do not have the technical expertise for that. Working at Deloitte for 2 years, I'm sure BCG is the same. The resources that you have, the amount of research that you do, it can't be done at a local level. It has to be done by someone who has the expertise.
Got it. And I'll move this to the same question to Rituraj. I mean, again, a very, very impressive story of scale that you spoke about, and I'm sure that the 2000 and the 9000 require a very different set of skills from an organization perspective. And how have you hence thought about the topic of control?
Well, I mean, personally, I think I look at it more from the company's requirement perspective than from what the promoter wants to do. I think I always recommend Founder Mentality, the book, to anybody who the whole concept of the unscalable founder. I think where a lot of Indian businesses start to get stuck is because the scalability of the business starts to become dependent on certain individuals, and that is where the institution creation somehow takes a backseat. So from my perspective, every business which is scaling has 4 stages essentially, irrespective of sector. You start out as a promoter led, promoter operated type of entity. You then migrate to a promoter led but professionals supported type entity. That's the second level probably of scale. Then you have to have the courage to make it professional led and promoter supported entity. And ultimately, I think, as all global businesses have been in the US and other parts of the world, it will become publicly owned and professional led. Now the question arises, what does the promoter do in that case, or what does the family do in that case? I think over time, as the business scales, the role of the promoter changes from a hands-on manager to, when you're a publicly owned company, you're listed on the stock markets, or you have private equity or whatever it is. I think you need to redefine your role. You need to figure out what to do and what not to do. And that's where I think a lot of promoters have their own set of challenges. I've had mine. But ultimately, I mean, if I talk about myself today, I think I see myself more as, my role as 3 things. It is about, visioning the future of the business. It's about capital allocation, and it's about maintaining the highest standards of governance as a public company. So, I mean, each one for themselves, and I'm sure others will define it in their own way. But I guess the core point I'm trying to get across is that scale of a business defines the management structure and the ownership structure, and not the other way around. And
Great point.
I think that's the way to lead it.
No, great point and very clear. And I would say it's a very good and very refreshing way of thinking about it. Viren, your thoughts? Again, as you guys have thought about the business, which is a business where candidly, supply side. I mean, the demand side is always strong, but the supply side and the viability of the supply side always comes under pressure. But your thoughts as you've thought about combination of scale, control, and professionalization?
Yeah, see, on the professional management, I don't think that's a question. I think any family business that evolved out of the farms where all our ancestors came from got professional management at some point. I don't think that's ever the issue. I think every family business in the country or any other country is happy to take on professional managers, professional help, and all of that. I think where the line gets drawn is in the roles you give them, right? As well as the kind of serious responsibility that is invested with CEOs. And I don't need to name the companies, but there are plenty of instances of very large publicly listed companies where CEOs are essentially placeholders until the prince or the princess comes of age. And then you can tell in the quality of decision making that happens in the meantime, because if you are a CEO in a company where you have a ticking clock, nothing much gets done. Or alternately, you start thinking about what is the kind of person you're attracting even at the lowest level. Right? What is the aspiration of anyone that's smart and enthusiastic and wants to grow? They eventually want to lead the company. But if as promoters you create this sort of artificial ceiling, which is that these top 3, top 4 roles, that's essentially reserved for friends and family. And then it just flows into the kinds of people that you're able to attract. You mentioned earlier about the HR being a neglected function. Yeah, I mean, manpower and the kind of resource that you're able to get fundamentally it depends on the kinds of processes you put in place to allow people to experiment, to go nuts, to have the same kind of freedoms that you as a promoter do enjoy. And that's why smart managers never stay in India. They go abroad because there is the very clear separation, whether you talk about the Ferdinand Pierce family of Volkswagen being very clear that, we're just board members and we're questioning you once a quarter. It's all fine and good for me to step back and say, I'll delegate responsibility, I'll sit back, I'll let you make mistakes. But if I'm in the office 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. and I'm going through all the emails going back and forth, and if I'm part of every meeting, then very clearly I'm not taking a hands-off approach. I'm taking a very hands-on approach. It's not to say that I'm doing it that well either. So very clearly on the divide of whether we're a hands-on promoter, I belong to the hands-on camp. Is that the right thing to do? No, because in this, I would say I would take the opposite tack of what Rituraj is saying. I would say that your ability to scale entirely depends on the kind of promoter you are and how much you're willing to let go. And let go meaning not to, let management go nuts, because there are enough instances also of family businesses that let the executive team do what they want and they really regretted that. But there is a handover process that eventually gets there. And very, very few companies, I think only Infosys comes to mind, is one in which, there basically is no family man or a promoter left lying there, and it's run entirely by professionals. And in the long run, they will evolve to, Western multinational standards. So I would say that it is still an evolving process. I mean, Indian business in its mature state is only, for most of us, you don't have any Tatas or Birlas in this group, but for most of us, it's only 20, 30 years old. We're all liberalization's children. So it's going to take us a while to get there. And get there we will. But not now.
No, I'm sure we will. I mean, I think, and Rituraj referred to, the evolution curve. A lot of, as we take inspiration from West and sometimes even the East, India still at an evolutionary journey on many fronts, but the pace at which it is evolving is, way quicker, way faster, thanks to a combination of people, resources, and technology that we have now at access. So I think, Abhishek, your thoughts on this one, and then I'll, I know I'm also conscious of time where we are 15 minutes in, and I do want last to sneak in a last couple of questions. But I think this is one place where I've honestly thought we good to dwell in, because the larger audience would appreciate your thoughts.
So for us, as the core business is education for us, having professional, there is no choice of not having professionals with us, because at every domain, be it higher ed or at the school ed, you need professionals to run the organization. As a promoter, we can't replace a principal or a dean or a vice chancellor for that matter. So for us, as a part of the management, have always been dependent on the expertise. We treat each of our school principals or the heads as the CEOs of that particular unit and allow them to take decisions. Whereas the management point of view, we focus on the vision, the growth of the business, capital allocation, and we ask these CEOs or the principals to develop a plan for every coming year, and then we let them, if once the plan is approved, then we let them just run the business or run the school the way they have planned once we have agreed to it. And then as a promoter, only thing we do is to have check and balances periodically. And I think that's really worked for us and helped us to grow in the last 15, 20 years, the way we have grown. So I think so it is a very fine line how you define professionalism, and it really works from business to businesses. For, like, as I said, for us, there's no option but not to have professionals running the business for us.
Got it. Well, it was a good conversation, but I think all four of you quite nicely, converged towards a fairly similar answer, and prefer to answer with a professional tinge to it, but not so much on the external capital side of it, but for a later time. How about and while I think we've spoken a lot conceptually and philosophically about how you look at promoter-run businesses, let's get to some tactics and tags. And I know that Shashwat referred to it early up on COVID-19, but maybe I could just request Shashwat as well as Rituraj on what have been your, COVID-19 has been full of everyday learnings, right? Right from very specific tactical learnings of running operations with shut factories and with instances, and with lockdowns and semi lockdowns and channels shut and e-commerce open and something happening, all of that. But I think, what would be at least the two learnings that you are taking away from the crisis? And I'm not trying to put a positive or a negative tinge to them, but as something that you believe will be our learnings taken forward in the times we live, for the times we will live. Shasha?
Yeah, sure. I think the first and the most important learning is that the ability to adapt and stay agile is by far the most important trait for an organization. An interesting book that I read by Jason Jennings, I think, is his book. I highly recommend it. It's called "It's Not the Big That Eat the Small; It's the Fast That Eat the Slow," which I think could not be more true. I think COVID. None of us could have thought that this is going to happen, right? But it did, and you have to adapt, you have to change, and you have to do it as fast as possible. You can't wait. So I think that has been my biggest learning, and that should be a permanent trait of the organization. You should not be reacting the entire time. Rather, you should have some form of scenario planning. Expect things to not work out, expect things to come up. The second thing that I think is very important that we've learned is that technology will play a key role in the success of the firm and for the success of India in the years to come. And rather than technology being something in the background as just a back end processes, it really should be a core focus of the organization. Something that I want Hindware to be is, I like to call it like a technologically fluent manufacturer, where technology is used for all our processes throughout, right? It's not just used for one thing. I think the rapid pace of development of technology has really changed the fundamental nature of manufacturing. AI, machine learning, AR, VR, everything is going to change the nature of manufacturing. I think it's very imperative to the success of the organization to continuously invest in technology throughout, and not just try to play catch up, but really identify the technologies that are going to help you over the next 10-15 years and then invest in it.
Rituraj, your thoughts?
Well, I think COVID has been a learning experience for all of us, irrespective of industry. But my two big takeaways, as you asked for, I think the first takeaway would be that crisis genuinely presents an opportunity. I mean, everyone's heard that a million times over, but if you look at the results of corporate India for the second quarter, or what it looks like for third quarter, I think zero-based costing, deep debt cuts, reinventing the way you execute your business, reimagining your supply chain, reimagining your customer experience. I think it's led to probably the most fundamental rethink in corporate India that one has experienced in recent times. And this is universal across sectors, across businesses, across scale. It could be a small grocery store and it could be a multi-billion dollar giant. I think everybody is completely leveraged off this situation. And I think it shows the true capability of the human spirit to fight back, with all you got when your back is against the wall. So I think uh, I, this crisis, we've lost a lot of lives, but I think if you look at it purely from a business and corporate India perspective, I think it'll do more good than damage. That's my take on it. Number one, and number two is, my faith on India. I mean, I've been very bullish on India always, and I think I have rediscovered my faith in the resilience of the country and the aspirational nature of our people. I think India has the capability to leapfrog. Our collective resolve is tremendous, and I think we are, as a domestic consumption led economy, I think we are substantially insulated compared to a lot of other countries in the world. And I think when I say that India has the capacity to leapfrog, and my conviction about India has got reaffirmed, I talk about the people and the way they have conducted themselves through this crisis, but more also about every other. I mean, let's talk about the government. I mean, it hasn't yet dawned upon most that, you know, the big reform of labor and land just slipped past. I mean, it took us 6 years to do IBC and tax reforms like GST and, create the MPC. It took us 6 months to do land and labor reforms back to back, and it didn't get talked about much. And the way RBI came out and did what it did through the last 6-8 months, I think it's fabulous. I think, I mean, there's a lot of reasons for people to be concerned and disappointed, but overall, I think my two takeaways are that, corporate India is on the rebound, and this crisis has been the best learning that we've had in many, many decades. It's challenged us to do our best. And number two, that economy wise, as a country, as people, I think India's resilience uh, and the aspirational nature of our people just got underlined once again for the world to see.
No, very inspirational thoughts. And look, in the spirit of efficiency, let me try and sneak in the last question here. To Viren and Abhishek, I think, and I keep this for the two gentlemen who are nicely ensconced in education and health, which is probably two of the closest industries to purpose. Viren, just a personal reflection from you on how are you discovering purpose? How are you discovering your role as a person, as a professional, and as an animal of current day society? And how are you thinking about not just that role, but how do you emanate that role into the larger societal ecosystem? Any thoughts from you which could inspire our audience?
I mean, I don't have those grandiose notions about myself. I'm just showing up for work, doing my job. Okay. I would say that definitely it is inspiring, the company that I'm a part of. It is inspiring to work under my father, someone who's dedicated his entire life towards both excellence and towards service and society. In our company, we don't really draw the distinction between what is the aspect that is the CSR, or the things that one gives back, or the normal business activities. Like, the whole company is essentially a living embodiment of what a responsible corporation needs to be. And so whether that extends to the fact that we run things in the highest standards of corporate governance, or that we don't contribute to agencies like PM Cares and so on, essentially because the work that we do and the free surgeries that we provide and the medicines that we do and the service that we do is essentially a consequence of the business that we choose to run. So there's no, I would say, guilt from our side, and we should never, I never feel guilt about the work that we're doing. And every night we go to sleep with a clear conscience. But I would say on just professionally, how I'd like to, develop and mold myself, I would say that every day, just try and do 5% more than the day before. If I'm able to do that much, at least, I would say it's a good thing.
That's huge if you were to apply compounded interest. Abhishek, your closing thoughts, and then we're almost at the end of the talk, but I'll maybe just try and just close the conversation there.
So for me, Rachit, our business is built around the society, and I think it is very important as my personal view is that it's very important for business to impact the society in whatever capacity they can. But I'm not too a big fan of how the CSR percentages are set and categories are made. I mean, every business has own way to give back. So for us, apart from running our own schools, we also run like the free schools, and we try to manage 10%. I mean, it's like an internal kind of pledge. We don't like publicize it, but it's like an internal pledge that 10% of our total strength we would want to teach for free, and try to make an impact in the society in that factor. And I mean, and this, what we started is not because the Right of Education Act came, but it was part of our DNA, part of my father's philosophy that if we impact the lower strata of the society and make success stories out of that, that will give us satisfaction than anything else. And since 2003, we have been following this thing, and today I'm very satisfied inside me that 1,700 such students are studying across our schools and universities. And I mean, you get 1-2 success stories also out of it. I mean, it just gives you that much amount of satisfaction that you are doing the right things the right way. I'll just like to quote one small example here with one of our students. A student comes to us, studies from grade 1, passes into the university, studies the university, and now works at KPMG. And his father is a peon working for one of the schools here in Bhopal for 7,000-8,000 rupees. And the daughter who studied across our system is now working at KPMG with a package of 10 lakh plus. So these kind of success stories really make what our business is satisfying. At the end of the day, we want to spread knowledge, and knowledge cannot be limited to the privileged, and it has to spread across. So I think giving back to the society is important, but how you choose to give it back should be left to individual businesses.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So look, we are 2 minutes short of the clock. Can I just, take this opportunity to thank each one of you, from FICCI, but candidly, more personally, I think each one of you, and I mean, your thoughts, your articulation, I think your perspectives, and I would really say, your vision is extremely inspiring. I mean, even as some, I myself have, jotted down multiple things, to be learned and emulated. So, thank you, gentlemen, for both your time and your views. I think just a quick synthesis of, the 5 points that I took away from this conversation, just to play it back to the larger audience. We heard about, I think, a lot around change, around driving change, and around, how do you set the right success examples internally, to exemplify, the change that you're trying to lead, especially as the young entrepreneur, trying to drive both incremental as well as transformational efforts. We spoke about technology and people to be a fulcrum of how life and how, time and effort going forward is going to be into the future. It was a very interesting conversation around, and I think what's embedded in my mind is what Rituraj said around bring what the company needs. It was professional help, professional capital, alternate capital, whatever is required for the company, rather than for, individual assessments and whims and requirements. I think that's what something that will survive the test of times. We spoke at length, and all four of you are playing your role, but about the India opportunity and, and prospects, as well as, the faith and belief on India's resilience, I think was another very inspirational point that got made. And lastly, I think, to sum it all, total societal impact, both just personally and professionally, and not try to, overemphasize or over benchmark, to establish metrics and thresholds, I think but to keep a total societal impact lens, I think is what each one of you are resolved to do. So I thought those 5 points are extremely inspirational. Thank you very much for your time. I know we've just shot out, so I'd close the conversation there, and pass it on to the team from FICCI. Lina, would you guys want to close this, or shall we exit the call now?
No, I think just Dilip Chinoy here. I just wanted to
hello,
thank
Dilip.
Shashwat, Ritu, Viren, AM and Rachit. Thank you for this session. I was quietly listening into it. I've been very quietly listening into all the sessions.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining the panel.
Rina, would you guys shall we exit the call now?
No, I think just Dilip Chinoy here. Just wanted to.
Oh, hello, Dilip.
Yeah, that's me. Rituraj, thank you so much. I really enjoyed the conversation. We just end the session. Rhythm has already announced that the session is ended. But since I was there, I wanted to thank you, each one of you, for being there. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
All
much.
the very best.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you, Rachel. No.
Thanks, Raj.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
So let's begin with the session of Women You Look Up To. I would like to introduce the moderator for today's session, Mr. Parikshit Luthra, Assistant Editor, CNBC TV 18. Now I would like to hand over it to Mr. Parikshit. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're joined by a panel of excellent women who've done very well for themselves in their respective fields, who've been breaking the glass ceiling almost every day. And for the past several years, these are all youth icons that we are going to be speaking to. They have been an inspiration for many, many women in their respective countries, and I'm sure they will inspire our audience to today as well. Let me just briefly introduce all of them. We've got Penny Burt with us today. She's the Group CEO of Asia Link. She's somebody, ladies and gentlemen, who's worn many hats. She's had 25 years of experience in diplomacy, trade, and investment. Currently, of course, heading Asia Link, but she has represented Australia in Asia and the UN as a diplomat. She's been advisor to the Minister of Foreign Affairs as well. She's been on the executive board of several key business associations and non-profit organizations. She's also a member of the Australia-India CEO Forum and has been a delegate to the Australia-India Leadership Dialogue as well. Penny, we're looking forward to talking to you. I'm sure we are going to learn a lot from your experience, and our audience will learn a lot from you as well. Helena Marshall, she's joining us all the way from Oberhausen in Germany. Helena, I hope I'm getting the name of your city right. She's been a climate activist with Fridays for Future. At the age of 18, she has been holding school strikes, demonstrations, actions, and campaigns for climate action for almost 2 years now. So more power to you there, Helena. Yasmin Poole. Yasmin is joining us again from Australia. She's an award-winning speaker, writer, youth advocate. She's currently Plan International's national ambassador and frequently appears on prominent Australian media programs to discuss the role of diversity in social change. She's also the non-executive board director of Oz Harvest, Australia's leading food rescue charity. She's just completed her exams as well, so you can congratulate her and wish her all the best as well. Then we have with us Arshi Ayub Mohammad Zaveri. She's the CEO of Trust with Trade Group, UAE. Arshi, we are very impressed by your achievements, and it's really a long list of achievements that you have. You're not just the CEO at Trust with Trade Group, you're the senior advisor to the Royal Family Office, World Peace Ambassador, Diplomatic World Ambassador at UAE at Diplomatic World. So these are just a few of things that I can speak about. But we also have with us Bhakti Sharma, and she's got a very inspiring story. She's someone who's contested local elections at the village level in India. She's been the Sarpanch of Panchayat Barkhedi of Douala since 2015. one of the youngest people's representatives in Madhya Pradesh. She's taken many initiatives on rural opportunities, gender parity, education, and trying to implement many policies at the ground level. And trust us, ladies and gentlemen, it's not very easy to work at the ground level in villages and getting all that work done for people. So we really respect you there, Bhakti, for all of what you've done in the past many years. But let's just kick off this discussion now. Let's not wait any more. I'm sure our audience wants to listen in and see what our guests have to say today. And let me begin with you, Penny. You're someone who's held a variety of positions in the government, in trade organizations, in business. What's been your biggest driver, your motivation? Was there any woman you looked up to?
Thank you, and that's a great question. There's actually many, many women that I've looked up to, and I've been incredibly fortunate across my career, which has been in government, as you said, in the private sector, and right now actually leading a think tank, so in academia and the not-for-profit sector. And those who I've looked up to, quite frankly, have varied from the women in my immediate life. I was fortunate enough to have a mother who worked and studied. My mother, to this very day, actually has more degrees than I do. She was an amazing role model, and in her generation, to make that choice, I think was a pretty tough one, actually, to strike out with a career of her own and go right ahead. And when I really step back, and I don't want this just to sound like everybody else's answer, but I've been very inspired by senior women political leaders, and most recently, actually, by the fabulous Jacinda Ardern, the New Zealand Prime Minister, who I think has just that amazing combination of leadership skills together with deep empathy, social conscience, and it's actually women like that who have stepped out but worn their values who've inspired me through my whole career.
Yeah, and women politicians like Jacinda Ardern really stood out for their handling of the COVID-19 pandemic as well. So we'll ask you a little deeper, probably during the course of the discussion, about how it is to be a woman in politics in Australia and around the world. We'll come to that question in a bit. But let me get Helena at this point. Helena, you've been a climate change activist. You've been doing a lot to rally people around together. What was your biggest motivation, if I could ask you?
I think my biggest motivation, honestly, and the people who, I in that realm look up to the most are, my generation. I look to other young people all over the world who are protesting under much harder conditions, who have very little, democratic rights in where they are, or we see young people who face severe repercussions for taking to the streets. And I just see young people in Germany every single day who just put in so much work and so much of themselves into this fight. And that drives me every single day, just to see like how much power and how much potential other young people have. And I'm just so impressed again and again of what we can accomplish and what my fellow activists are doing.
Very more power to you there, Helena. And Arshi, if I can bring you in, you're someone who started business at the age of 17. Did you have any vision in mind that you followed? And also, coming up from a country in the Middle East, was it difficult to start off?
Well, thank you, Parikshit. Firstly, I'd like to extend appreciation to FICCI, the entire team, the chairman, for putting all of this together and having this incredible discussion with these panelists. I'm extremely honored and privileged to share the stage. Well, yes, I think I started off very early, like you know, and like most people know here. I started off at the age of 17, and of course, it's never very easy when you are juggling work alongside education and taking up a full-time job, whilst also whilst also beginning your business. So of course, I think it was never easy, very overwhelming. There were a lot of mistakes that I made, but then I think the upside is that it really taught me a lot of skills that I cherish up until today. It really taught me human skills. I think management of that is extremely vital, critical for anybody who's intending entrepreneurship. So I think my professional endeavors have always been extremely explorative, and that's also the reason why I've been doing different kind of things in diversified backgrounds in UAE and all across the world. So it's never been very easy, but I think fortunately I have a family. I have a father and mother who've been very progressive despite coming up from a background in the Middle East. I think one thing that I remember very well, and I think I will also mention it here with all our esteemed panelists, is that I've been told that progression is not the way you look or the way you dress. Progression is in your mind. So that is something that I totally believe in, and that's what I hold on up until today. Thank you.
Progression is in your mind. But again, this is something that we've been asking others as well. Did you have any role model as you were growing up? Did you see somebody and said that doesn't matter where I'm from, I am going to be like that or maybe even better?
Well, I actually, just like Penny mentioned, I think definitely my mother has been one person that I've really looked up to. Unfortunately, she's not been as prolific as Penny's mom. She's not really completed her education. She was married at a very early age, and education was up until only high school. However, I think one thing that I really appreciate and I have to commend is that she started reading books in English and Arabic so that we could be fluent in the language. She started learning all of this so that she can converse with us and have so that we have larger command over the language. So I think the fact that she's so self-motivated, so full of life, so very curious, these are attributes that I really that have come to me to a certain extent. I'm awfully glad of that, and I think that is the really growing up and up until today. I think that's one woman I really hope and aspire to be. Thank you.
Great to hear. And Yasmin, coming to you, tell us about your thoughts at 21. You have been the chair of the Victorian Government's Youth Congress. That was in the past. You've got a wealth of experience under your belt already. Tell us about your vision of leadership. When you think about a leader, what do you have in mind? What do you have in mind at that time?
It's a kind of a hard question to answer because I think for me it involved having to challenge the traditional understandings of leadership that I had grown up with. And when we think about role models, I look back and I would turn on the TV and I would watch politics. Even at a young age, I was already quite interested. I'd watch that, or I'd look at the political television shows, and I'd never see people that look like myself, which is a young Asian Australian woman. So what was interesting actually is my role in the Victorian Government's Youth Congress, which was representing over 1 million young Australians. What was really interesting about that, it was the first time that I had been tasked to lead. So we were advising the Minister for Youth about reforming youth policy. And the power I found through my own version of leadership and through everybody else in that program's leadership is that we all came from incredibly diverse backgrounds. So it wasn't just myself as a young person, there were young people from refugee backgrounds, Indigenous backgrounds, people that from LGBT backgrounds, experienced homelessness. And what the power of that and our combined leadership was actually the value of lived experience. And that's something that I think all young people have in this moment right now, as we just mentioned, talking about our mothers, the lived experiences of not only the good and the winning times, but the hardships, the things that make us rethink or appreciate what we want to change in the world and what justice actually looks like. So I guess the way that I would view leadership is that idea of having that vision for the future and being able to look back and reflect on your own experiences and expand your mindset about what you envision justice to look like. And there's a really great quote that I heard. We often talk about the decision-making table and getting a seat at the table, but somebody once said, if the table doesn't fit, we'll sit on the floor. And if the room is too small, we'll go to a hall. And I really love that analogy because I think it really demonstrates the power of us all collectively stepping into our own unique experience to change the world.
That's a beautiful line. Let me go across to Bhakti now. Bhakti, you've been a sarpanch at the village level, quite an achievement there, and doing a lot of work at the ground level. in the rural sector as well. And as Yasmin was pointing out, that if there is no space on the table, we sit on the floor, but you want to make a difference. Was it difficult entering politics? And when you are in this world of politics, elections, village politics as well, how do you see it and how do you maneuver? How do you motivate yourself day after day? Do you have somebody in mind? Do you have a vision of leadership in mind that you follow, Bhakti?
Oh, so many questions. Yeah, indeed, yes. So, when you talk to me about what are the views or how do I take politics? So, for women, it's always difficult to come in politics, to be very straightforward to you, because, coming in politics at a ground level is not very difficult. Any day I think that, oh, yes, I need to go along with some kind of political ideology. I'm going to just go to the office, enroll myself and start working in the way that political ideology works. Okay. And at the rural level, I think of contesting in elections, and be it the sarpanch elections, the janpat elections, or the up sarpanch elections, or just the sarpanch sadasya elections, the janpat panchayat sadasya elections. So at this point of time, what I've always felt is, in today's present context, that women tend to have a kind of a cover across them when it comes to politics. This is what the young women of our country across the world, we need to leave that cover and then come in the front and then think of coming up, becoming a successful politician, because we need to understand that we cannot just demand privileges just becoming just because I am a woman, I cannot demand privileges of my own. One thing. And one more thing is that we need to inculcate some kind of skills onto us, so that we could compel the decision makers that they can take us as a contestant in place of a man when it comes to the elections in our country. And always believe that, even in 100 years of suppression, when today I see women of the country, whether they're startups or entrepreneurs or the CEOs of the companies or running industries or, clearing the civil services with flying colors. So why not in politics? Oh, yes, there are hostilities. There are, people who would be backstabbing you, backlashing you, but that is everywhere. That's not just in politics, but that's across. Just don't mind me saying that. I might sound very feminist, but even today in our society, men tend to, feel that division in their brains and minds, that yes, women belong to home and men belong to the work. This kind of mentality needs a change now. I was very recently seeing one of the elections of Bihar state in India, and I could see that how the women changed the scenario just by the voting. So it's all about the rights that the women need to understand. And yes, I'm sure we're going to discuss about a lot of hostilities and a lot of other issues. In the panel. Yeah, thanks.
The biggest thing, but I would like to share this with this entire panel, that in India we have been trying to bring a women's reservation bill to reserve seats for women in parliament, all legislative bodies in the country to the local level, and it's been pending approval of the parliament for almost more than a decade now. So yes. That also speaks volumes and explains where things are. But let me get in Penny once again. Penny, when you're talking about politics, and we were hearing Bhakti's experiences, that women some are a little reluctant. There is a cover. There is a sort of hesitation when it comes to entering politics. Do you feel that that's there in Australia as well, or women there have managed to overcome that?
That's a great question. Thank you. And Bhakti, let me say how much I admire you. Ahead of this panel, I actually did a very quick bit of work to make sure I knew about the level of representation of women in Indian politics and at leadership levels in the corporate sector. And the number that kept coming up was women have 14%, 1/4 of parliamentary seats in India. I didn't realize that the bill on representation had been sitting there for a decade, but remarkable for a woman in that environment to step in and step up like you have. That's fantastic. Politics in Australia is actually a fairly robust game, and quite frankly, women are still underrepresented in Australian politics. Not at 14%, but definitely in the federal parliament and in some state parliaments at well less than a third. And I think women have been sometimes reluctant, not because they don't have the capability, and not because they don't have the leadership quotient, but actually because there's been a reluctance to make space for them. And quite frankly, the environment can be so overtly hostile that you have to find these deep reserves of remarkable resilience to be successful. We do have some amazing women politicians, but there is also quite a long history of women politicians having suffered sort of deep misogyny, actually. And I'm sure Yasmin could add a perspective to that. I think women are also, it's worth saying, not the only underrepresented group in our politics in Australia. We don't have very much in terms of cultural diversity in politics either.
But do you feel, Penny, that that a woman has to work doubly hard to prove herself? And do you feel that, be it diplomacy or business, it is difficult for a woman to get her voice across in a room or on a policy matter in the workplace? Or is this a cliche that I'm talking about?
I think, and I'm going to tell a little story here which relates to a point that Yasmin made earlier. I don't think that's myth. I think it can sometimes be far harder for women to make their way because there are actually structural barriers, quite frankly, that prevent them from stepping in and stepping up in the same way as their male counterparts. People also, I constantly hear women are not there as leaders because they don't want to be. They want to be at home. They don't want to have to become that resilient. They don't want to experience this. And I think that that is actually the misnomer. That's, you know, to assume that every woman is the same and every woman has the same motivations is just ridiculous. To think 100% of men want to be leaders and 100% of women don't is a fallacy. But the kind of barriers to participation when we're talking about politics, I was teaching a leadership course in Vanuatu in the South Pacific to a group of fabulous senior women. And we were doing an exercise on communicating with influence. And I was giving a tutorial about, well, when you're sitting at the table in the meeting, you know, whether it's in the corporate sector or in politics, always make sure that you sit opposite the chair and you're in line of sight to the most powerful people at the table, and always make sure you speak early. And these women looked at me, and then one of them said, well, excuse me, but actually in Vanuatu, particularly in village meetings and also in other meetings, women are not allowed to sit at the table, they have to sit on the floor. So if you're sitting on the floor, it's very difficult in a village meeting to get eye contact with the chair of the meeting because you're not actually at the table and you're not allowed to speak. And it was one of those cross-cultural moments where I suddenly realized I was taking for granted the fact that, you know, I even had the opportunity regularly to be at the table, and I'd figured out ways of making myself heard. I was very happy to teach other women about, you know, tips and tricks. And these women weren't even at that table. And while they were trying to get organized on the floor, it still made it a lot tougher. So I'll just stop there.
That's a beautiful story there. And Yasmin, if I can get you in, do you have similar experiences? You know, you've been speaking a lot about the need for diversity in social change. You've been speaking about how, as you want to speak about your role. You want to speak up for Asian Australians there in your country and also around the world. But when you started off doing this, when you started raising your voice about issues that matter to you, do you feel that there were friends, there were women who wanted to do the same, or who felt that you were possibly wasting your time or you wouldn't get heard, things like that? Were you told stuff like that, Yasmin, when you started off?
I think I've actually been fortunate to have a lot of support through my work. The times where I've actually experienced pushback is when I'm challenging power. And this is what I think this conversation is about. It's about power when we think about politics. And I find the more that I'm pushing back against these kinds of sexist politics and really calling it, not only it out, but certain individuals out or organizations out for, frankly, not doing enough. That's, I think, when people feel confronted. But the reality of these conversations is that they are necessarily uncomfortable. And if they aren't uncomfortable, I don't think we're talking about the right issues, because at least, if we look at the Australian statistics, for example, we've been having more female politicians, it's slowly increasing. But if we look at the number of female ministers, which is the higher level of politicians in Australia, the number has barely changed. And we've only had one female prime minister, which is the highest leadership position essentially here in Australia. And I've noticed this increasing problem of, even in the workplace, but also in politics, of women kind of always having that entry-level position. But the problem is who we understand as leaders, or what we conceive of what leadership looks like, is masculine, even if we don't realize it, because subconsciously we've seen the same people in positions of power, which in Australia it has been since the late 1800s when they established parliament, the same kinds of groups always in these positions. It isn't even, the structural barriers are definitely one thing, but in and of itself, it's hard for women to, in a sense, authentically step into their own leadership if they're also having to satisfy people that are expecting leadership to look and feel masculine. And we've noticed that, women feel this kind of double-edged sword, because they, of course, want to raise these issues around women and really push. But at the same time, it's also having to win the respect of male colleagues and male voters and male supporters. So it's frankly more difficult for women to, and that's what I guess what you were saying before about women working twice as hard. It's a bit like a balancing act of women having to satisfy all these different audiences in a way that men wouldn't have to. And not to mention the fact that women are often perceived as aggressive or rude or cold if they show leadership compared to men. So I think it's that real cultural shift that I'm really pushing for, and also thinking intersectionally about these problems, because here in Australia, we have more women, but what about culturally diverse women? Or what about women that are disabled? Or what about women that are low income? So when we talk about feminism and participation, it's holistic. It can never be a trickle-down approach, because if we look at history, that hasn't really worked to liberate and free all groups in society.
Right, and possibly that, Yasmin, because they have to satisfy so many groups, address so many concerns, that's what makes women in leadership positions more emotionally intelligent and empathetic as well, isn't it? Helena, if I could get you in right now, as Yasmin was pointing out, that there is often a pushback. There is a certain vision of leadership that you have, a masculine vision of leadership. Did you feel that as well? The reason why I'm asking you that, Helena, is you are in a field, you're a climate change activist. When you fight against policies, when you want things to improve when it comes to our climate, these are difficult conversations. You're sometimes up against multinationals or government policy. These are not easy conversations that you're having. So do you feel that when you have to convince different sets of people, or the opposite gender, do you feel that difficulty as well? Are you often questioned, maybe for your experience, your age, your gender?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess often when when I have conversations with, ministers or with people, in power, or, in different, panels or conversations, it's mostly, older white men who we are trying to convince to do their job, because we shouldn't actually have to stand on the streets and have these conversations. Like, the governments of the world signed the Paris Agreement. They should already be acting on the climate crisis. But, they're not. So whenever we're standing anywhere, obviously it's always a critical standpoint, because we're always saying, okay, you're putting our future on the line. And that's a heavy statement to make. And that obviously always creates pushback. But I've also had the strange experience of our movement, especially in Germany, getting huge support. And that is obviously great in a way that we brought 1.4 million people onto German streets on one day in September under one motto. And that was obviously amazing. And we see that, on a societal level, we have just a huge amount of support, and also, that makes it quite easy in a lot of ways, because we start a conversation at already a different place, because we don't have to take the first step of even convincing anyone that the climate crisis is a problem. But that also means that increasingly we see politicians and men in power not doing anything, so not acting at all, but speaking about how inspiring we are and how great it is what we do. And that is obviously a strange situation, because we keep getting complimented and we keep getting, told, or I get told, how wonderful the work is that I do. And when the content of it is obviously, I just want them to do their job, and then that step does not happen. So that's, and I feel like that's a very different experience to activists in other countries where, the people in power are even denying that the climate crisis is a problem. So that's, I feel like, a very it's a strange situation though, to get so much support when that's not really what we're asking for in a lot of situations. And I want to quickly say something to the other point, because I feel like so much when we speak about women's equality, it's always, we need to empower women. And I feel like that's quite an absurd sentence, to be honest, because women have power. Like, we don't need to be given it, like, we have it. The problem is then obviously the structural problems and making space, because there will never be more women in positions of power if there are the same amount of men. So, there's going to have to be less other people if we want to have more women in those positions. And that, I think that is the step we need to be talking about. And if that means that sometimes men need to take a step back if there is a qualified woman there ready to take on that job. And I feel like in the climate movement, it's quite a different situation though, because it's such a female movement. Like, it's mostly women who are at the forefront, who are taking these steps, who are, protesting for our future. And in a lot of ways, that does mean that, the male climate activists in our movement recognize that and, take a step back and support us from, behind. And I feel like that's a really, really important thing I've learned over the last 2 years.
I think, Helena, that's a brilliant point. When we talk about women empowerment, when there are people praising you, saying that as women, you're doing a great job, I think it's a disservice as well, unless you not make those changes on the ground and take those points to their logical conclusion as well. But I'd like to tell all our panelists here that when it comes to the Indian media, most of the TV channels here in India are headed by women and brilliant women editors. My managing editor is a brilliant female journalist, and so is it for several TV channels. And I think that's also that also speaks volumes. But I completely agree with you that around the world we need to really make those structural changes and make place for women and make sure that whatever they are saying, that translates into policy as well. But let me get you in about the being a politician, being a woman politician on the ground, convincing sometimes male colleagues, male voters. How is it?
It's actually difficult, I'll start up with very small instances. At the age of 25, when I started to, went for the canvassing of my elections. So, in India, let me also tell you, Penny, I forgot to tell you that in our country, we have 50% reservation for the women at the grassroots level. That constitutes approximately 48%, 6.3 million people being elected as sarpanches, janpad, mayors, and MLAs only in our country. Okay. Yeah. So, for the women, I always think it is actually very difficult, because when I was going for the canvassing of my elections at the age of 25, a lot of women used to come, and in a very taunting manner, they used to ask me, what happened if you got married? Who's going to, contest and who's going to take the whole sarpanch thing in the future? So they always had this very, small thing in their mind, that what is going to happen if she gets married, if she's not coming. Because, in our country, there's a concept which is very prevalent that, the females who have been elected at the grassroots level, their husbands, their brothers, their father, or their brother-in-laws would take up the charge and start doing those, they would be performing those responsibilities. What I have learned all this while is that women, even in this panel, I was listening to Helena, and and across, we have always faced some kind of hostilities or bans that people tend to put on us, whether they are the administrative people, the executive people, the colleagues with whom we are working, even our secretaries. So they tend to look up to us as if we have to take that one extra step so that we can prove ourselves. There's again, even when I used to go to the administrative officers to get some of my work done, many times they would just look at me and ask me, why have you come? Why, where is your brother? He can also come and see. Where's your father? So one day, carrying all my self-respect and esteem, I asked him, so that you see a Sarpanch father or Sarpanch brother on my left or my right? So he just nodded no. I said, this means I am the Sarpanch and I'm going to work because this is my responsibility and my duty that I have to do it. Why do you keep on every time asking why my brother is not here or why my father is not over here with me? So, at the very starting age, I understood that, you said right, Parikshitji, that yes, there has to be a structural change. There has to be a change in the mentality. That false ego, that needs to, shook off now. We need to break that glass ceiling. Let me tell you one more thing. Many times we see that people say that yes, women needs to fit in. I don't understand that concept of that. Why do we need to fit in the women? Why cannot we provide an environment where they can work in a better manner? Because there are 3-4 things that specifically in our country that I say have been noticed. So one is that there's this work and home balance that needs to be maintained, and we really need the whole chunk of men to support us when it comes to that home balance. Okay. Second thing is that the financial share or the aspect that even the Supreme Court has guaranteed us, they should also be kept in mind when women tend to come in politics. And yes, the one thing that really upsets me is continuous, bombarding or assassinating personal character of the women. That happens everywhere, whatever profession you take, and whichever part of the continent or the country you are in. And yes, not giving women the good environment to work, a healthy environment where she can work hand in hand. So I believe that these are the 3-4 things that really, any aspiring, any budding politicians or anybody who's trying to come up in any good field, even a social activist, should keep in mind that these are the 3-4 things, and we really need to balance them. Because yes, I've been facing them. I was facing them when I was 25. I'm facing them even when I'm 30. So yeah.
No, I completely imagine, and I'm sure that things might be even more difficult for Arshi. Arshi, I'm sorry to keep you waiting. Now, my question to you, if you look at the World Economic Forum Gender Gap Index, UAE is ranked 120, and despite taking strides towards women empowerment, I'm not going to use this term again, Helena doesn't like this term, but the legal system still is rather patriarchal. And I'm sure it's not just about UAE, there are other countries in the world as well where laws are patriarchal. But do you feel that the system there in the UAE, in the Middle East, makes it more difficult for women to start off and hold their own?
Well, thank you so much. It's wonderful hearing thoughts, Penny, Helena, Bhakti. I think wonderful stories and anecdotes shared. I'd first like to give you a little bit clarity on how things are in the Middle East. I think everybody over here from the East and the West needs to be aware. The UAE cabinet comprises of 32 ministers, out of which 9 are female. Portfolios of whether they are Minister of State of International Cooperation, Director General for the Expo, whether it's Minister of Culture and Human Development, Community Development, Public Education Affairs, food security, advanced sciences. These are some portfolios that are handled by women ministers. 30% of the UAE cabinet is female, and almost, I think, as same as the UK government and higher than most countries that we are speaking about right now. I think India has 22% cabinet ministers that are female. I think the fact that 30% of these members in the cabinet, they play key roles in supporting technology innovation in the country. Women are not only making a mark in just as a minority, but oftentimes they are leading these initiatives from the fore. This is the only country in the world which has the Federal National Council comprising 50% of women. 60% of government sector employees are all women. I don't see these statistics or numbers in the West or in any country that we are recently speaking about. Definitely, I think when it comes to equality, I think one thing needs to be, and from an individual standpoint, I will make certain things, I think, shared with all our wonderful panelists here. Gender equality in principle is something that we must not try to achieve. We can't be equal by the virtue of our gender, number one. What we must try to be and strive for equality is cerebral equality, equality of opportunity, equality of access in the society as genders, men and women. This is extremely important to understand that we are not trying to equate ourselves to the other gender. We are not trying to do that. If you are meritorious, if you have that certain place and qualification to be in a role, you should have that. And I think 60% of government employees are clearly speaking volumes about the fact that how meritorious positions are in the UAE, specifically as a country, and I think as a beacon of progress and hope for the entire Middle East to take over these kind of activities. We are definitely very, very grateful to His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi and our Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces. His vision primarily has really led to women taking up these positions. And I think patriarchy, Parikshit, we have to mention that patriarchy first starts from your homes, fundamentally. We have to realize that this actually begins for a woman from her house. My father, fortunately, has been very progressive in his mind and thoughts, and he's always been that mentor, not just a father, but also a person I share my businesses with. So I'm very fortunate that we come from family of progressive values. And specifically for UAE, I think there's a lot of statistics that everybody will be very happy to know about. Like I mentioned, UAE cabinet, but in 2012, the Prime Minister, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, made sure that it is compulsory to have women on board positions, minimum one. Women they just don't enjoy equal opportunities, but I also have to mention the capital managed by women in this country and their own businesses, about $3.17 billion specifically by women-owned businesses. In September 2020, keen on advancing further female empowerment, His Highness Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed, the president of the UAE, issued a law ensuring that women receive equal pay as men in the private sector. This definitely is giving a boost to inclusivity, is really supporting national development and also advancing the UAE status on, like you mentioned, on the World Gender Equality Index. Women-owned businesses not just account for 10% of the total private sector, but 23,000 Emirati businesswomen run projects worth over AED 50 billion, and 15% of the positions in the chambers of commerce and industry are taken over by women. UAE has a 100% women policy recently launched, and it is in the core agenda for UAE's national strategy to be aimed by 2021 for women empowerment and equality. I think, like Helena mentioned, I also agree that empowerment is not specific to. I mean, we as men and women, we are empowered in our own capacity, but we need to remember that there are certain section of people who aren't, and the idea is to elevate them. So I think by policy, number one, we have to ensure that women take up more positions, meritorious. I am somebody who's always worked with men. The sectors that I come from are oil and gas, energy, mining, and shipwrecking. Even up until today, practically there are no women over there. There are a lot of things that have come my way, and it's never been very easy. Let me put it that way. I wouldn't. I'm not somebody who would complain and pick out pinpoint certain things. But let me tell you that as a woman in our DNA, where I think we're resilient by our DNA, we have to really learn and nurture that skill in our own self, and really understand that if you've chosen this path for yourself, then you might as well stick, and you have to be resilient. You have to stay, and you have to really work very hard towards it. Somebody mentioned working twice hard. I think you have to not just work twice hard, you have to work probably 10 times harder than most people. And that is fine. We must not look at it as a downside. It's really an opportunity for us to challenge ourselves, really grow and make better versions of our own self. And I look at it that way. I think when I mean, we don't see, I'll share a very small anecdote from my experience. Whilst being in shipwrecking, we're practically having no women. We're only having the ship cutters and the laborers and sitting in yards all day long, and being the only woman who's leading that. I think it was not so easy. It was really difficult because doing a job in a suited place or in a place in an office is different compared to doing this. But let me tell you that those experiences really made me the person that I am, and has taught me a lot of skills that's really beneficial for the work that I do. And I'm really fortunate to have had those experiences. I'll put it that way. I don't look at it as a downside, and I'm someone who's always looked at these challenges as an opportunity. Thank you.
But Arshi, do you also feel that when it comes to decision making or your attitude towards your own employees or your own workforce, do you feel that women are that way more emotionally intelligent, more empathetic, and that shows in policy making, decision making, and day-to-day interaction with employees as well?
Well, somehow I think by the virtue of the gender, I think definitely women are more empathetic, and they have larger levels of EQ. But I also know men who have that. So it has nothing to do with just women. I know plenty of men who are extremely empathetic, they're compassionate, they care. So it's really something that we all should be, and it's not supposed to be a woman thing. Compassion and care and empathy is not supposed to be a woman thing. It should be in every leader, whether you're leading an organization, whether you're leading families, whether you're leading a nation. It's you need to have those attributes irrespective. So definitely women have that larger, because again, by the virtue of the gender, we're blessed to have these characteristics ingrained in our DNA. But I can safely say that most men also do have that today. And I think curriculum, schools, and education institutes are also taking up these courses for young ones to learn these attributes, because I think curriculum today needs to have these kind of things at the fore for children to know that there are things like emotional intelligence, there are things like compassion that need to be taught. It just doesn't come to you. You need to be taught all of this.
So I'm just looking at your profile. There are at least 12 or 13 different roles, hats that you wear, Arshi. So if I would ask Arshi, what next for you in the next 10 years, what would that be?
Well, I think it's quite a question, and I haven't been asked these kind of questions in a while. Thank you, Parikshit. You reminded me of my first interview at the age of 18. So I never thought I'd be doing that. What I was at 28. So I don't know what I'd be doing 10 years from now. But I think one thing that I know for sure is that there's one certain key thing that I practice in my personal and professional life, is that I prioritize learning over productivity. I think that is one thing that I'd like to continue doing even 10 or 20 years from now, is to continuously keep learning, because it's really something that has changed the way I think. It's really changed the person that I am. And I think that is something that I would continue doing. For sure, I don't know where professional strides would take me 10 years from now, but I'm hopeful, because there are plenty of exciting things that we have ventured into of lately, whether be it digitization, tokenization of commodities, specifically on blockchain, upcoming fintech, developing curriculum on cybersecurity and cyber surveillance. We are doing very, very exciting things here in the UAE. Most who are not aware, but the UAE, 40% of federal transactions are already on blockchain technology. I think when it comes to adaptation of the upcoming interesting aspects, UAE is definitely at the fore, not just from a Middle Eastern, but from a global standpoint. So we have some very exciting things lined up, and I think 10 years would just go by the flick of a second. I think I can't really put down a plan, because everything has been quite spontaneous in my life. And fortunately, let me share something with all of you over here. No one day is the same in my life, and trust you me, that's also the reason I get up every morning. It's really it's different. Every morning is different. Every evening is different, and that is also one of the reasons that I choose so many diverse paths and projects and be a part of them.
All right. Thanks, Arshi, for telling us about yourself. I'm now going to take some comments on from all our panelists here. And Yasmin, I'd like to begin with you. You're just 21 years old. I'm sure a lot of people in your class look up to you for inspiration. If you had one suggestion that you had to make to youth on people who want to take up such roles, what advice would you give people?
I think often young people are quite afraid of using their voice. And I think a reason why is that our future and our career is something that we're looking ahead, and we're afraid that if we speak our mind now, it might come back to haunt us later. And that was actually a fear that I had when I was, even younger than I am now. Even saying the word feminism, surprisingly, was something that I actually was worried about, because I thought that might be taking too strong of a stance. And I think what a shame, to think that the extraordinary capacity of young people to make a difference can be hindered from those kinds of fears. And I found that really the only way I genuinely feel like I'm making an impact is when I truly am speaking authentically. And I think that's the reason why I'm now on 2 boards. That was something I never could have anticipated, but it was through kind of going in with the confidence that these are my views and I'm pushing for an equal future. And if some organizations or individuals don't like that, so be it, because I will chart my course with people that align with my values. And I've been fortunate to have, success following from that, but also people that really do align with those values that I'm putting forward into the world. And there's a good quote that I remember, which is, "Speak your truth, even if your voice shakes." And I really resonate with that, as with any young person. Because it's certainly not easy. It's not an easy thing to suddenly challenge or push. But as Helena said, that power is something that is already within us. It's something that we were born with, that we all have capacity. So I think that recognizing that, it's to step into that and to also find others that genuinely support and empower and uplift you. And if you're in spaces that don't, and I recognize that this is different with politics because there's a wider vision here, but find the people in your corner. And I think that's really the first step towards having the support needed to forge on into your leadership journey.
Right. And Helena, you're in a business where you have to motivate a lot of people to join demonstrations or to join you in raising your voice about a particular issue. So what's the punchline that you use to motivate people, to inspire others?
I think that's a big question, because obviously I do a lot of like campaigning and strategic coordination, because we have over 600 local groups all over Germany, and we have to coordinate worldwide and Europe-wide and so on. And that was always the big question: how are we going to mobilize for this next action? How are we going to keep doing this? Because obviously the tone that we use now after almost 2 years of school strikes is a totally different one than when we first started. But I think what's really clear, and what we say again and again, is that we have so much still to win. So, every 10th degree warming less means that less people will suffer, and that we have so much still to gain if we act right now. If that's looking at making our cities more livable, if that's looking at, making our air more breathable. And I feel like, remembering that there's a positive vision. So this isn't just about being against something. So this is about like creating new stories and creating a more resilient society, and sharing those visions and sharing our stories is what I think really can move people. And I feel like that's what makes, the youth climate movement as a whole, that's what makes us powerful, because we make it personal and we just tell our story. We say that, like, I'm really, really scared what will happen if we don't act, and I'm really frustrated with governments. And sharing that is, I think, what is really moving other people, and being vulnerable in that way. And I feel like I can do that, and I can, it's obviously, it can be really tiring on some days to share your fears and hopes again and again, and to do that on a media stage or whatsoever. And having women in my corner and people who support me and who stand behind me is really, really essential when doing this work. And makes it, because there's a lot of days when, especially young people and young women in the climate movement, we get shitstorms, we don't get nice comments on social media, and a lot of the time in compared to male activists, it's comments that immediately go to how we look or what our bodies are like, or really sexist comments and attacks, and that but it's like I can withstand that, because I know that like there's a lot of people supporting me and who are standing behind me.
Right. Penny, I'm going to ask you how you advise people now, and how would you like to inspire the youth. But there is a question coming in from Vandana. She's a member of our audience. She's watching this. This question is actually for Arshi. I'm going to get in Arshi's comments as well, but I'll ask you that. And I think it was about Arshi saying that women should not be talking about equality, but what do you feel about that? Because others have spoken on this panel about the need for structural changes. So what do you feel about that question?
What do I feel about the equality question?
Yeah.
I think Arshi made some really interesting points about how we define equality and what it is that we're actually looking for. And there are many different ways of trying to measure equality and empowerment, dare I say. I think it's actually quite important that instead of striving for some kind of objective measure of equality, and I think some people on the line will know that I'm Miss Data driven and I always like a good set of data points. So we actually do have to measure at some point. But at the end of the day, come back on these issues to actually, the way we should think about the equation is that we should provide the context in which every person, and particularly every woman, can actually be their very best selves and bring their very best selves to their work, to their education, to actually whatever context they're operating in. And I know that seems a bit simplistic. At the end of the day, that doesn't mean that things like, parity and pay are not important. And I was planning on sharing a whole lot of data with you around representation of women in the corporate sector and in leadership. That's all important, but I actually think rather than debating amongst ourselves, what does this actually mean? I'm going to put out a really simple understanding. It's about creating enabling environments in which women as well as men can actually be the selves that they want to be.
And I'll ask you that question as well as to how would you like to inspire the youth? If tomorrow you want to inspire someone to get into politics, into diplomacy, into business, what would your advice be?
My advice on inspiring young people for their careers. Sorry, I was just turning off my telephone. My advice is actually, and I think your panel demonstrates this incredibly well, no matter what you're aspiring to in a career, you've got to think really hard about what is your passion and what's going to get you out of bed, because life is long, there are lots of tough days, and there's lots and lots of challenges. So if you can find in a career some reason to get out of bed and something that is going to make you feel as though you're making a difference, it's going to be far easier to get out of bed every day than it is doing something just because your parents said it was a great idea, or it sounds like a really fancy title, or, dare I say, you're going to have a big car. At the end of the day, my career advice is always go back to first principles and think about your passion. Think about what really motivates you. And that can actually be a really guiding light. I often hear too from younger people in their careers, they say, well, I'm trying to make a career change. What next? I'm not sure I'm in the right thing. And I give exactly the same advice. Actually, your career, your day job is not your life. Think about what matters, come back to that, and then that's going to give you purpose and meaning in what you're doing.
And if I can also jump in there as well, I just wanted to quickly add that COVID-19 is really, as much devastation as wreaked, it's essential. This is really a defining moment for young people to step, and young women especially, to step into that space. And the reason is that we haven't had a financial crisis like this essentially since the Great Depression. And as a result, we're seeing major economic impacts for women, including young women being pulled out of education and lack of access to reproductive care, and ongoing employment issues into the future. So it isn't just young women stepping forward for the sake of it. There's still so much work to do. And there is tremendous scope for us to truly push and really rally for leaders to hear our voices and to step into that leadership in order to not only support our generation, but generations of young women following us as well.
Right. Yasmin, thank you so much for raising that point about COVID-19, because I just forgot that according to a UN study, the effects of COVID-19 pandemic could reverse the limited progress that has been made on gender equality and women's rights. The coronavirus outbreak increases existing inequalities for women and girls across every sphere, from health and the economy to security and social protection. According to the study, COVID-19 will have a greater impact on women than men. And Bhakti, I would like to ask you that question. Around villages, in India's towns, rural areas, cities, do you get a sense that women are harder hit due to COVID-19 today?
Come again, what was that? I'm sorry.
Bhakti, according to a UN study, women have been more badly impacted due to COVID-19 because their responsibilities increase at home as well, with the elderly, with children, with the husband, and possibly handling their jobs as well. So do you feel that in India, be it in rural areas, be it in cities, women have been badly hit? Perhaps they're worse off than women due to the COVID-19 impact?
Maybe United Nations were more focused on the urban areas. I might disagree a bit, because when I was working, we have been working with the self-help groups in my panchayat. If I talk about, we have approximately 12 self-help groups, okay? And especially with the coming up of the Atmanirbhar Bharat concept that Pradhan Mantri Narendra Modi ji spoke about, and also about giving about 20,000 crore rupees in the panchayat, things have actually changed, because the migrants who came back to the villages, they've been given the works under Manrega. Then in respect to the Ayushman Bharat, the medical facilities have been on a good go. Now, coming to the self-help groups, the kind of the work they're doing, and especially with the local for vocal thing that the government is putting a lot of stress on, it is actually trying to, make women financially independent, socially more capable, and economically more strong. So that is something that I could not see personally when I visited approximately, I must say, 100 villages across Bhopal. And, the women, they were, I don't know, these reports might be true when it comes to the respect of the, the industrial sector, or maybe some kind of a tertiary sector. But yes, in the agriculture sector, with the self-help groups having, tremendous impact, not only on the food processings, the food, and the other units. So we don't see such a bad impact, or something I can say in a negative sense. On the contrary, I've always believed that things have changed. The concept of the social engineering has changed. The cultural context, the ethical context have changed, especially during the COVID and after the COVID, and that too in respect to the farmers and the women as a whole. Yeah.
And my final question to you, Bhakti, would be how do you inspire other women, other girls to get into the political sphere, do well for themselves in politics? What would be your advice?
To all the strong women who are listening to me, and wherever my word goes, let me tell you all that yes, we don't have to compare ourselves to anyone. We don't have to compare our generation to the generation that is gone. There are three things that we need to keep in mind. One is a very strong financial base, to be very honest. Second is we need to increase our intellectual skills every now and then. And third, we need a proper mentoring, because in politics is very unpredictable. And what was wrong today is not wrong, today. And what is wrong today may not be, wrong in the future. So the complete determination and dedication that yes, we are here to serve our people. We are here to be the voices of the farmers. We are here to be the voices of the women. And we're going to strongly stand for gender, not equality, but also justice and gender parity. And with a lot of creativity and commitment that we have, I'm sure that we can actually bring a great change, not only in the politics of the country, but yes, across the world. Because we women, as together, when we stand hand in hand, I'm sure that we can actually bring a social change across, the structural change, whether that's what we're talking with Penny or with Helena or with Urshi or with Yasmin, it's the same. So it is the women who need to join hands today and work. And yes, whatever our gut feeling is that yes, we're in the right direction, we need to go for it. Forget about the people, forget about the mentality, forget about whatever hue and cry they make. it is how we can grow up. And yes, there's a very strong media, at the end of the day there's a strong government that actually wants women to come up. They understand that yes, we are the 50% population of this nation, of this world, and yes, they just won't let us go. So just stay strong, stay lively, and yes, stay confident with whatever you're doing and whatever you're saying. This is one thing that I would like to tell all the women. And there's a very small line that I was going by this Netflix, The Crown. So the princess, she says to the queen that don't confuse your long-term security with the current popularity. So in order to have that long-term security, we really need to work every time, and to all the women, whenever you feel that yes, there's nothing left, you have to see how Arshi was saying, how Helena was, how she was pointing out her things, how Penny has come up with all those, backlashes and stabbings and hostilities. And yes, we are all over here, and we will be always here. Yeah, thank you.
Beautiful thought, and we're really celebrating all you women over here. This panel is about each one of you, your achievements. We're celebrating all of you to inspire other women. But Arshi, my final question to you now. I'm sure you're somebody who's breaking the glass ceiling day after day, week after week, month after month. So when people look up to you, when women come up to you, how did you do this? How did you manage to do that? How did you manage to reach here? How do you inspire them? What's the tip that you give them, Arshi?
Thank you so much, Parikshit. Thank you, Bhakti, Penny, and Helena. Yasmin, I think wonderful views shared. Every one of them added some really notable points for all the young women and men listening to us today, not just women, but men as well. We're very thankful to you, Parikshit. I think it takes a great man to be in a room full of a woman. I always say that. Thank you very much.
I look up to all of you.
Thank you so much. And I will, before I get to that, I just want to add one quick one, that when I say equality, it's not about equating the gender. We are different. We have to respect our differences. Remember that equality, cerebral equality, equality of opportunity, of accessibility is essential for any woman to achieve, and for men as well. I think women are overtaking positions, and we might see a day where we require this equality quotient to sort of have more and more place for men in the society, because as we are progressing and how men are progressing these days, it's becoming a situation wherein we have to have that equal hand in accessibility, in opportunity, in your society, in your homes, in your workplaces. That is extremely important. I think one advice, like just an extension of all these wonderful panelists mentioned over here in terms of their advices, make sure you note each and every one of the advices that have been given over here. They are very, very important, and they come out of great experiences. I will conclude by saying that I think it's very important to have role models. It's important to be inspired, but we have to remember that each one of us is unique. We are different, and have to respect that point. Just because I follow a certain lifestyle, or Penny follows a certain lifestyle, or Bhakti, or for that matter, any of us follow a certain lifestyle, you don't have to do that. You don't have to ape our lives. You have to find your own ground. You have to find your own self. Never, ever try to ape somebody just because Elon Musk, Michelle Obama, or any one of us follow a lifestyle. You don't have to do that. If we make up 6 in the morning, it's perfectly fine to get up at 8 in the morning if that works for you. So make sure you find your own place, and because we have to remember that our belief, our sense of emotions, our level of endurances are different, our attitudes are different, and we have to respect that. So I think conclusively, I would just say that it really is very simple. Find your own place. Don't try and ape anybody. Be inspired. That is wonderful, but find your own place.
Thank you so much, Arshi, Helena, Penny, Yasmin, Bhakti, for joining us. It was wonderful listening to all of you, and I'm sure our audience really enjoyed this conversation. And this is really inspiring. This was about women we look up to. But I guess the messages that all of you delivered is not limited to women alone. It's they are for men, women, children, teenagers, for everyone. And I really learned a lot from each one of you. And hearing stories from you really inspired me, and I'm sure that it must have inspired a lot of people in the audience as well. Thank you so much. You are women we celebrate. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Parikshit. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Parikshit, for moderating that. This is Dilip Chinoy. I'm the secretary of FICCI. Thank you, everybody, for coming in and sharing your thoughts today.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. It was fabulous, and what a great panel. I'm so inspired. And beautiful moderating.
Thank you so much, Penny. Thank you, Helena. Thank you, Bhakti. Thank you very much, Arshi.
I think, Rhythm, with that, we end the session.
Yes, sir. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. It was lovely to see you.
Bye.